I'm Emma Sullivan, and I'm 22 years old. 6 months ago, what should have been the happiest day of my life turned into an absolute nightmare when my own mother and her new husband tried to steal my $120 million inheritance. If you're watching this, please hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from, because this story of family betrayal, corporate manipulation, and ultimate justice is going to blow your mind. You know, people always ask me how I ended up running a tech empire at 22. The truth is, I never really had a choice in the matter. My story begins with tragedy, but it's shaped by resilience. And let me tell you, it's got more twists than a Hollywood thriller. When I was 10 years old, my world shattered. My father, David Sullivan, died in a car accident on a rainy Tuesday evening. He was coming home from work, probably thinking about helping me with my math homework or maybe planning our weekend fishing trip. Instead, a drunk driver ran a red light and took away the most important person in my life. That night, I didn't just lose my dad. I lost my childhood innocence and any sense that the world was a safe, predictable place. My mother, Sarah, completely fell apart. Now, I understand grief affects everyone differently, but what happened next still haunts me to this day. Within 6 months of Dad's funeral, Mom was more interested in her social calendar than in helping her grieving 10-year-old daughter process the most traumatic experience of her life. I remember sitting in my room, crying myself to sleep, wondering why Mommy didn't want to read me bedtime stories anymore or help me with school projects like Dad used to do. That's when my grandfather, Thomas Sullivan, stepped in and literally saved my life. Grandpa Tom wasn't just my father's dad, he was a legend in Silicon Valley. This man had built Sullivan Technologies from absolutely nothing. Picture this. In 1982, he was working out of a garage in Palo Alto with nothing but determination, a brilliant mind, and an unshakable belief that technology could change the world. By the time I was born, his company was worth millions. By my high school graduation, we were talking about a valuation of over $100 million. But here's what made Grandpa Tom truly special. Despite all his success, he remained the most humble, hard-working person I've ever known. I still remember him telling me, "Emma, money doesn't define character. Actions do." Those words became my North Star. After Dad died, I spent every weekend and most of my summers at Grandpa's estate. While other kids my age were hanging out at the mall or going to pool parties, I was shadowing Thomas Sullivan through the halls of Sullivan Technologies, absorbing everything I could about business, technology, and leadership. The employees watched me grow up. Many of them became like family to me, more consistent and caring than my own mother during those difficult years. By 16, I was helping with basic market research. I wasn't just filing papers or getting coffee. Grandpa actually valued my input. He'd ask me what I thought about new product ideas, how we could better connect with younger consumers, what trends I was seeing among my peers. By 18, I was sitting in on product development meetings, contributing ideas that sometimes made it into our final designs. I majored in business administration with a minor in computer science at Stanford, following in Dad's footsteps. Actually, he'd gone there too. Every summer, I worked at Sullivan Technologies, learning different departments, understanding how each piece of our complex puzzle fit together. Grandpa never pressured me to join the family business, but he beamed with pride when I expressed genuine interest in it. "You've got your father's analytical mind and my stubborn streak," he'd tell me with that trademark twinkle in his eye. "That's a powerful combination, kiddo." Meanwhile, my mother, Sarah, was cycling through a series of increasingly questionable boyfriends. Look, I'm not trying to shame anyone for their dating choices, but it was painful to watch. Mom was beautiful and charming when she wanted to be, but she had absolutely terrible taste in men. After losing my father, a kind, stable, hard-working man who adored her, she seemed drawn to his complete opposite. Flashy guys, irresponsible types. Men who were clearly more interested in her money than in building anything real with her. I lost count of how many awkward family dinners I endured, watching some new guy try to impress Grandpa while obviously calculating how much our family was worth. Most of these relationships lasted 3 to 6 months before imploding in dramatic fashion. I started keeping an emotional distance from Mom's boyfriends because I knew they'd be gone soon anyway. Then, 6 months ago, everything changed when Mom brought home Jake Morrison. Jake was different from her usual type, and that should have been my first red flag. He was polished, articulate, and seemingly sophisticated. He claimed to be a former sales director at Tech Flow Industries, one of our main competitors. He wore expensive suits, drove a luxury car, and had this practiced charm that immediately set off alarm bells for both Grandpa and me. But Mom was completely infatuated. I'll never forget that first family dinner. Jake asked pointed questions about our company, not casual, polite interest, but specific inquiries about our market share, our research and development budget, our international expansion plans. He seemed more interested in Grandpa's business connections than in building any kind of relationship with our family. After dinner, Grandpa pulled me aside privately. "I don't trust that man," he said quietly, his expression more serious than I'd seen it in years. "He's not here for your mother. Emma, mark my words." But Mom wouldn't hear any criticism of her new boyfriend. Within 3 months, they were married in a lavish ceremony that Jake somehow convinced her to pay for entirely. I stood beside her as maid of honor, forcing a smile while watching Jake's eyes constantly wander to the wealthy guests Grandpa had invited. He wasn't celebrating his marriage, he was networking. After the wedding, Jake quit his job at TechFlow, claiming he wanted to focus on being a family man and supporting Sarah in this new chapter of their lives. Red flag number 2. What kind of ambitious sales director quits their job to be a house husband, especially when that job was at a major tech company? Within weeks, Jake began appearing at Sullivan Technologies functions uninvited, introducing himself as part of the Sullivan family business. Our employees would call me, confused and concerned, after he requested confidential reports or tried to sit in on strategy meetings. I started getting these awkward phone calls. "Emma, your stepfather is here asking for the quarterly revenue reports. Should I give them to him? Or Jake Morrison wants to observe our product development meeting tomorrow. Is that approved?" Each time, I had to explain that Jake had absolutely no authority at our company. But I could see the confusion and concern in our employees' eyes. They were wondering why there seemed to be this power struggle brewing within the Sullivan family. During this same period, Grandpa's health began declining more noticeably. He'd never fully recovered from a heart attack 2 years prior, and I could see that the stress of watching Jake circle his life's work like a vulture wasn't helping his recovery. Grandpa was 78 years old, and while his mind remained sharp as ever, his body was showing the wear of decades of intense work and the emotional toll of recent family drama. I began taking on more responsibility at the company, spending longer hours learning everything I could from Grandpa while we still had time together. Those evening sessions in his home office became precious to me. We'd review quarterly reports, discuss market trends, and talk about the future of Sullivan Technologies. "I'm not worried about the company, Emma," he told me one evening as we analyzed our competition's latest product launches. "I'm worried about you and your mother when I'm gone." I assured him I could take care of myself, but we both knew Mom was vulnerable to manipulation. Jake had this uncanny ability to identify and exploit her insecurities, her deep-seated fear of being alone, her need for constant validation. It was painful to watch, but Mom seemed determined to ignore every red flag we pointed out. What I didn't know then was that Grandpa had already set a plan in motion, one that would force all of us to show our true colors and reveal exactly what we were made of. My 22nd birthday arrived on a perfect September Saturday. Grandpa had insisted on hosting a celebration at his estate, though his idea of small gathering included about 50 guests. His sprawling garden was decorated with twinkling lights strung between the trees, and he'd hired a jazz quartet to play near the pool. The guest list was carefully curated: family members, close friends, and several key executives from Sullivan Technologies. Mom and Jake arrived fashionably late, which had become their signature move. Mom looked stunning in a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, and Jake wore a custom-tailored suit with that practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Mom said, air-kissing both my cheeks. "You look absolutely lovely. Doesn't she look lovely? Jake?" Jake nodded, but his eyes were already scanning the crowd for important business contacts. "Very nice. Is that Walter Chen from Tech Venture Capital over there?" he asked, practically ignoring me to scope out networking opportunities. I bit back a sarcastic retort about his priorities and instead thanked them for coming, though I was already dreading whatever drama might unfold during the evening. Throughout the party, I kept noticing Jake cornering various executives, engaging them in conversations that made them look increasingly uncomfortable. My cousin Lisa pulled me aside after escaping one such interaction. "Your stepfather just asked me how much I thought Uncle Thomas was worth in total assets," she whispered, looking disturbed. Like, who asks that at a birthday party? It was so awkward and inappropriate. Around 9 o'clock, Grandpa called for everyone's attention by tapping his champagne glass with a silver spoon. The crowd gradually quieted as he made his way to the center of the patio, leaning slightly on his walking cane. Despite his physical frailty, his voice remained strong and commanding when he spoke. "First, let's all wish my beautiful granddaughter a very happy birthday," he began, leading the crowd in a rousing chorus of "Happy birthday!" I blushed, standing beside him as everyone cheered and applauded. "Emma has been the absolute light of my life since the day she was born," Grandpa continued, his voice carrying across the garden. "After we lost her father, my beloved son David, she became even more precious to me." His voice wavered slightly with emotion, and I squeezed his hand, feeling tears prick my eyes. "Tonight, I want to make an important announcement," he said, straightening his shoulders and addressing the crowd with renewed strength. "After 40 years at the helm of Sullivan Technologies, I've decided it's time for me to step down and retire." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This was news to everyone, including me. I looked at him in surprise, my heart starting to race, but he just winked at me with that mischievous smile I knew so well. A company needs young blood, fresh ideas, and unwavering integrity to thrive in today's rapidly changing market, he continued. "I've been blessed to watch Emma grow into a brilliant, hard-working young woman who understands not just the business side of our company, but its heart and soul, our commitment to innovation that improves people's lives." My heart began pounding as I realized where this speech was heading. Across the garden, I could see Jake suddenly paying very close attention, his casual conversation abandoned mid-sentence as he strained to hear every word. "Therefore, as my birthday gift to Emma, I am transferring majority ownership and control of Sullivan Technologies to her, effective immediately." The words hit the crowd like a thunderbolt. Gasps and exclamations erupted around us as I stood frozen in shock, my mind struggling to process what had just happened. Grandpa beamed at me while the company executives who had known me since childhood began applauding enthusiastically, quickly followed by most of the guests. My cousins exchanged glances that mixed surprise with obvious envy, but my focus was drawn like a magnet to my mother and Jake. Mom's smile was tight and artificial, her eyes wide with surprise and something else. Anger? Confusion? Jake didn't even bother trying to hide his reaction. His face flushed dark red, his jaw clenched so tight I could see a muscle twitching in his cheek. "Thomas, this is quite unexpected," Mom said, her voice artificially light as she approached us, Jake following close behind like a storm cloud. "Shouldn't we discuss such important family matters privately first?" Grandpa's smile never faltered, but I caught a steely glint in his eyes. "There's nothing to discuss. Sarah, the paperwork has already been finalized and filed. My attorney is here tonight with all the necessary documents." On cue. Walter Freeman, Grandpa's lawyer for over 30 years, stepped forward carrying a leather portfolio. "Everything is legally binding and in order. Thomas," he announced to the crowd, "we just need Emma's signature to complete the transfer." The next hour passed in a complete blur. I signed document after document, my hand shaking slightly as the magnitude of what was happening gradually sank in. A $120 million company, my grandfather's life's work, was now my responsibility. Executives came forward to congratulate me, many with genuine enthusiasm and warmth. "Your father would be so incredibly proud," whispered Susan Chen, our chief technology officer, as she hugged me tightly. "You're going to do amazing things, Emma." Throughout the signing process, I kept catching glimpses of Jake whispering furiously to my mother, whose celebratory facade was cracking more with each passing minute. I knew this wouldn't end here. There was no way Jake would let this stand without a fight. But for that magical moment, I allowed myself to feel the full weight and wonder of Grandpa's extraordinary gift. As the party continued around us and guests began to leave, Grandpa led me to a quiet corner of the garden, away from the crowds and music. "Are you upset with me for not warning you beforehand?" he asked, his eyes twinkling with mischief and love. "Shocked is more accurate," I admitted, still trying to wrap my head around everything. "Grandpa, are you absolutely sure about this? This company is your entire life's work." He took my hands in his weathered ones, his grip still surprisingly strong. "Emma, I've been preparing you for this responsibility your entire life. You understand what Sullivan Technologies stands for. It's not just about profits, but about innovation that genuinely improves people's lives. I trust you to carry that mission forward more than anyone else in the world." His confidence in me brought fresh tears to my eyes. "I won't let you down," I promised, my voice thick with emotion. "I know you won't," he said firmly, then glanced over my shoulder toward Jake, who was now at the bar downing what looked like his third or fourth scotch. "And don't worry about the vultures circling around us. I've been dealing with men like him my entire career. I know exactly how to handle his type." That cryptic statement should have been my first clue that Grandpa had anticipated everything that was about to unfold over the next few days. The last guests departed around midnight, leaving only family in Grandpa's massive house. I was helping the catering staff clean up in the kitchen, still trying to process the life-changing events of the evening, when Mom cornered me. Jake loomed behind her like a thundercloud, his earlier facade of celebration completely abandoned. "We need to talk," Mom said, her voice clipped and cold in a way I'd rarely heard before. "In the study. Now." I followed them. my stomach knotting with dread as I sensed the confrontation that had been brewing all evening was about to explode. Grandpa had retired to his room earlier, citing fatigue from the long celebration, though I suspected he knew exactly what was coming and was giving us space to hash it out. Jake closed the study door behind us with unnecessary force, the sound echoing through the warm, book-lined room that had always been my sanctuary. Suddenly, that cozy space felt claustrophobic and hostile. "What the hell was that performance tonight?" Mom demanded, pacing back and forth in front of Grandpa's massive oak desk like a caged animal. "This whole inheritance spectacle? Grandpa's retirement gift, apparently," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I was just as surprised as you were. This is completely irresponsible and frankly dangerous," Jake interjected, his polished sales voice abandoned for something much harder and more threatening. "You're barely out of college. Emma, you can't possibly run a company of that magnitude and complexity. You'll destroy everything your grandfather built." I squared my shoulders, drawing on the confidence Grandpa had spent years instilling in me. "I've been working at Sullivan Technologies since I was 16. I know this company inside and out, the products, the people, the culture, the vision." Mom waved her hand dismissively, as if brushing away my entire life's preparation. "Working summers and having a part-time job while studying is hardly the same as running a multi-million-dollar corporation with hundreds of employees and international clients, which is exactly why," Jake said, stepping closer with a predatory smile. "We've decided that I'll be taking over as CEO while you learn the ropes properly. It's the only responsible approach." The sheer audacity of his statement left me momentarily speechless. "Excuse me," I finally managed. "It makes perfect sense," Mom continued, as if they'd rehearsed this entire conversation beforehand. "Jake has extensive executive experience in the tech industry. He'll manage day-to-day operations while you finish your education and gradually take on more responsibility over time." "Absolutely not," I said firmly, my shock quickly transforming into anger. "Grandpa made me the owner and CEO. The paperwork is signed, witnessed, and legally filed. This isn't a discussion. It's done." Jake's mask of reasonableness completely evaporated, revealing the calculating predator underneath. "Listen, you entitled little princess," he snarled. "This company needs experienced leadership, not some naive girl playing businesswoman because Grandpa felt sorry for her." "Jake!" Mom exclaimed, though she seemed more concerned with his tone than his actual words. "No, Sarah, she needs to hear this," he snapped, his voice rising. "Your grandfather is a sentimental old man making irrational emotional decisions. The board of directors will never accept a 22-year-old as CEO. They'll laugh you out of the building, and the company will collapse within 6 months." My hands trembled with rage, but I forced my voice to remain steady and professional. "The board has known me my entire life. Many of them congratulated me tonight and offered their full support. They've watched me grow up in this business. Support that will evaporate the moment they realize you're completely in over your head," he sneered. "Be reasonable, Emma. Let me handle the business aspects while you keep your fancy title and enjoy the profits. It's a win-win situation." In that moment, I saw everything with crystal clarity. Jake had been planning this from the very beginning. Marry my vulnerable mother, ingratiate himself with Grandpa, position himself to take over the company when the time was right. He just never expected Grandpa to bypass them both entirely and hand everything directly to me. "The answer is no," I said firmly, my voice gaining strength with each word. "I am the owner and CEO of Sullivan Technologies. Grandpa chose me, not you, and there's nothing you can do to change that." Mom's expression hardened into something I'd never seen before: cold, calculating, almost cruel. This isn't just about you, Emma. This is about our family's legacy. Jake and I are trying to protect you from making a catastrophic mistake that could destroy everything your grandfather built. By stealing my company? I asked incredulously. It's not stealing when it's family. Jake shot back with twisted logic. But if you want to be difficult about this, fine. Here's how it's going to be. Either you accept our help in running the company, or you can pack your bags and leave this house tonight. I stared at my mother in disbelief, waiting for her to contradict this outrageous ultimatum to choose her daughter over this man she'd known for less than a year. She didn't. You'd actually kick me out of my childhood home because I won't let your husband take over my inheritance? I asked, my voice breaking slightly as the full weight of her betrayal hit me. Mom's eyes flashed with anger and something else, resentment, maybe even jealousy. This is my house too. Emma, Jake is my husband. And if you can't respect our position in this family, then yes, perhaps you should find somewhere else to live. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain I'd ever experienced. My own mother was choosing this con artist over her daughter, over everything we'd supposedly meant to each other. Fine, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I'll go. Don't be so dramatic, Mom sighed, as if I was being unreasonable. Just agree to Jake's proposal and we can all move forward as a happy family. Some family, I muttered, turning toward the door with tears burning my eyes. As I reached for the handle, a low chuckle came from the doorway that sent chills down everyone's spine. We all turned to see Grandpa standing there, still in his party clothes but leaning heavily on his cane. Despite his physical frailty, there was a fire in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Well, he said, his voice deceptively light but carrying an underlying threat that made Jake visibly pale. Isn't this an interesting family discussion I'm overhearing? Thomas, we were just discussing the transition arrangements, Jake stammered, trying to recover his composure. I heard exactly what you were discussing. Grandpa cut him off sharply, and I must say, Jake, you've shown your hand rather earlier than I expected. Not a very patient man, are you? He stepped into the room with surprising steadiness, his gaze shifting to my mother with profound disappointment. Sarah, I'm ashamed of you, though I can't say I'm entirely surprised. Dad, please, Mom began, but Grandpa held up his hand for silence. Emma, he said, turning to me with gentle authority, go pack a bag. Not because you're being kicked out, but because you'll be staying at my guest house for the next few days. Tomorrow morning, we implement Plan B. Plan B? Jake echoed, his voice cracking slightly as worry began to replace his earlier aggression. Grandpa's smile was cold and calculating, the expression that had made him legendary in Silicon Valley boardrooms. Did you really think I'd hand over my life's work without multiple safeguards against vultures like you, Jake? I've been in this business longer than you've been alive. Son, I know exactly how to deal with parasites. As I left the room to pack, I heard Grandpa say quietly to them both, You've made a very serious miscalculation. By tomorrow morning, you'll understand just how serious. I walked out with tears streaming down my face, but with Grandpa's steady presence behind me, I felt something else growing inside, the first stirrings of a righteous anger that would carry me through the battle ahead. The guest house on Grandpa's property was larger and more luxurious than most people's primary homes, but that night it felt empty and cold despite its beautiful furnishings. I barely slept, replaying the confrontation over and over in my mind, trying to understand how my own mother could betray me so completely. By morning, my sadness had crystallized into steely resolve. Mom had made her choice. Now I would make mine. Grandpa arrived at 8 sharp, carrying a thick folder and wearing what his employees called his battle suit, his finest tailored outfit reserved for the most important negotiations and confrontations. "Sleep well?" he asked, knowing perfectly well I hadn't. "Not really," I admitted, pouring us both coffee with hands that were steadier than I'd expected. "Good," he nodded, surprising me. Anger and righteous indignation are much better fuel than complacency. You'll need that fire for what's coming today. Over breakfast. Grandpa outlined what had been happening behind the scenes during the 3 weeks since Jake and Mom had returned from their honeymoon. The information he shared was staggering and terrifying. Jake had been systematically meeting with board members, carefully planting seeds of doubt about Grandpa's mental acuity and decision-making capabilities. He'd been suggesting that advancing age and health issues were affecting Grandpa's judgment, making him susceptible to emotional rather than logical business decisions. More alarming, Jake had been contacting key clients and business partners, introducing himself as the future leadership of Sullivan Technologies, and subtly undermining confidence in the current management structure. Some of our most conservative clients had already expressed concerns about instability in our family business. Most shocking of all, Jake had been actively courting potential buyers for the company, specifically DG Future, a larger tech firm notorious for hostile takeovers and asset stripping. Their CEO, Marcus Collins, was known throughout the industry for buying innovative companies, dismantling them, and selling off their intellectual property and client lists to the highest bidders. "How do you know all this?" I asked, astonished by the depth and specificity of the information. Grandpa's eyes twinkled with something between amusement and satisfaction. "Because I've had him professionally investigated since the day after he proposed to your mother. I didn't build a $120 million company by trusting people at face value." He slid several photographs across the table that made my blood run cold. There was Jake meeting with executives from DG Future. Jake in what appeared to be intimate conversation with a woman who definitely wasn't my mother. Jake shaking hands with Marcus Collins outside an expensive restaurant. "Jake Morrison isn't even his real name," Grandpa continued matter-of-factly. "It's Jake Stevens. He's changed his identity twice that we know of. His specialty is targeting wealthy women, gaining access to their assets, then disappearing with as much liquid capital as he can extract." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. "Does Mom know any of this?" Grandpa's expression softened with genuine sadness. "Your mother sees what she wants to see. Emma. She always has. She's so desperate to fill the void your father left that she's willing to ignore obvious red flags." He explained that we needed to move quickly and decisively. Despite the legal transfer of ownership, Jake was already making aggressive moves that could destabilize the company and create opportunities for hostile takeover attempts. By noon that day, I discovered just how aggressive those moves had become. When I arrived at Sullivan Technologies headquarters, my headquarters now, my access card was denied at the main entrance. The security guard, a new hire who didn't recognize me, refused to let me enter without proper authorization. I called Susan Chen, our chief technology officer, who came down to vouch for me. She looked confused and deeply concerned as we rode the elevator to the executive floor. "There was a company-wide memo this morning," she explained carefully, "from Jake Morrison, identifying himself as acting CEO by family appointment. It stated that all executive decisions now require his approval pending a board review of the ownership transition." My hands clenched into fists as the full scope of his audacity became clear. He has absolutely no authority here. Susan, none whatsoever. "Most of us who've been here for years know that," she said diplomatically, "but he's been very persuasive with some of the newer board members and department heads." He's presenting himself as the voice of stability during a period of uncertainty. The situation was even worse than I'd imagined. Jake had commandeered my father's old office, the space that was supposed to become mine, and installed himself there as if he owned the place. When I confronted him, he had the audacity to smile that practiced, condescending smile. "Emma, how good of you to come in," he said, not bothering to stand up from behind the desk. "We really need to discuss your role during this transition period." "Get out of my office," I stated flatly, my voice carrying more authority than I'd known I possessed. His smile hardened around the edges. "Your mother and I have been having productive conversations with several board members. They have legitimate concerns about your experience level and emotional stability. Until those concerns are properly addressed, I'll be overseeing daily operations to ensure continuity. That's not your decision to make, and you know it. We'll let the board decide that at the emergency meeting I've called for tomorrow morning," he replied smoothly. "In the meantime, I suggest you shadow some department heads and really learn how this business operates at the ground level." I was being treated like an intern in my own company. When I tried to access the executive computer systems, I discovered my credentials had been restricted. By mid-afternoon, an email went out to all staff indicating that during this leadership transition period, all departmental decisions exceeding 5,000 needed Jake's written approval. For 3 nightmarish days, this situation continued. Jake had somehow managed to change locks on several key offices. Mom was calling board members, expressing concerns about my emotional stability and readiness for such enormous responsibility. Rumors began spreading throughout the company that I was being gradually sidelined due to inexperience or even substance abuse problems. Several loyal employees who expressed support for me found themselves suddenly reassigned to undesirable projects or excluded from important meetings. Jake was systematically isolating anyone who might challenge his authority while building a coalition of supporters among newer hires and board members who didn't know our family history. I was staying at Grandpa's guest house, unable to return to my childhood home where I'd lived since college. Each night, I came back defeated and furious. Each morning, Grandpa would calmly ask, "Are you ready to fight back yet, Emma?" On the 4th day, I finally broke down completely. "They're winning, Grandpa," I sobbed, collapsing into one of his leather armchairs. "Jake is systematically turning everyone against me. Even people who've known me my whole life are starting to doubt whether I can handle this responsibility. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am too young and inexperienced. Okay?" Grandpa set aside his newspaper and looked at me with an intensity that immediately commanded my attention. "Are you finished feeling sorry for yourself?" His bluntness surprised me out of my self-pity spiral. "Emma, did you think taking over a $120 million company would be easy? That everyone would just accept a 22-year-old woman as their boss without testing her resolve and capabilities? This isn't just about Jake. This is your first real leadership challenge, and how you respond right now will define your entire career." He leaned forward, his voice gaining strength. "You can surrender to a con artist and prove that you're exactly as weak and unprepared as he claims. Or you can stand up and demonstrate why I chose you over every other possible successor. The choice is entirely yours." His words stung, but they also ignited something deep inside me, a determination I hadn't known I possessed. "What's Plan B?" I finally asked, my voice stronger than it had been in days. Grandpa smiled, not his kind, grandfatherly expression, but the shark-like grin that had made him a legend in the cutthroat world of Silicon Valley. "I thought you'd never ask." That afternoon, Grandpa revealed the true genius of his succession planning. The ownership transfer documents contained several carefully crafted conditions that neither Jake nor my mother knew about or understood. While I now owned 70% of Sullivan Technologies, Grandpa had strategically retained 25% for himself, with the remaining 5% distributed among long-term employees and public shareholders. But the most crucial clause was buried deep in the legal documentation, Section 23B. This section clearly stated that during the first year of transition, no financial transactions exceeding $10,000, no hiring or firing of executive positions, and no structural reorganization could occur without the express written consent of both Emma Sullivan and Thomas Sullivan. He can sit in that office all he wants and play CEO, I realized, reading through the documents. But he can't actually access company funds or make any significant changes without both of our signatures. Precisely. Grandpa nodded with satisfaction. Jake can issue all the memos he wants, but he can't touch our bank accounts, can't fire anyone important, and can't restructure departments or sell assets. He's essentially been playing dress-up in an empty office. Furthermore, Grandpa had been quietly preparing key executives for months. Susan Chen, James Wilson, our CFO, and several other longtime employees had been privately briefed about the eventual transition. They had been instructed to appear to comply with Jake's demands while carefully documenting everything he did and said. The company has been loyal to me for decades, Grandpa explained. Most of the veteran employees would walk through fire for the Sullivan family. They've been waiting to see if you would fight for your inheritance or simply give up at the first sign of resistance. That evening, Grandpa introduced me to Martin Ross, a corporate attorney who specialized in hostile takeover defenses and family business disputes. Together, we formulated our counterattack strategy. The emergency board meeting Jake had called for the next morning would become the perfect stage for our response. As we finalized our approach, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. The hurt and betrayal were still there, but they had transformed into fuel for a determination I hadn't known I was capable of. Jake thought he was dealing with an inexperienced, easily manipulated young woman. Tomorrow, he would discover exactly how wrong he was about the Sullivan family. Part 3, the final showdown and victory, 4,000 words. The boardroom of Sullivan Technologies occupied the entire top floor of our headquarters, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Silicon Valley. By 9 a.m. sharp, all 12 board members were seated around the massive mahogany table, along with key executives and our legal team. The atmosphere was thick with tension and anticipation. Jake sat at the head of the table, Grandpa's traditional seat, wearing an expensively tailored suit and an expression of practiced concern. My mother sat beside him, looking nervous but determined to support her husband's play for power. When I entered with Grandpa and Martin Ross, the surprise on Jake's face was almost comical. He'd clearly expected me to either not show up at all or arrive alone and defeated. "Thomas," Jake said, standing awkwardly and momentarily flustered, "we didn't expect you to join us, given your recent health concerns and the emotional nature of this situation." "My health is perfectly fine for something this important," Grandpa replied pleasantly, taking a seat halfway down the table. I sat beside him with Martin on my other side, our presence clearly disrupting whatever narrative Jake had planned to present. Jake recovered quickly, that salesman's smile sliding back into place. "Well, we're certainly glad you're here. As I was about to explain to the board, we're facing a very delicate transition period. While Emma's inheritance is, of course, legally binding, there are serious concerns about placing the entire company under such inexperienced leadership." Several board members nodded, particularly the newer appointees who didn't know our family's history well. I recognized the ones Jake had been courting, younger executives he'd convinced with his polished presentations and manufactured concerns about my capabilities. The technology industry is more competitive and complex than ever. Jake continued, warming to his rehearsed speech. Our clients demand stability and proven leadership. Our competitors are constantly looking for signs of weakness to exploit. In this environment, we simply cannot afford to treat a $120 million corporation as a training ground for someone fresh out of college. More nods around the table. Jake was playing his hand expertly, I had to admit. Therefore, he said, building to his crescendo, I'm proposing a temporary leadership structure that would allow Emma to gradually assume greater responsibility while ensuring the company's immediate stability. I would serve as CEO for the first 2 years, with Emma as president and heir apparent, learning the complexities of executive leadership while we maintain continuity for our clients and stakeholders. When he finished his presentation, he looked around the table expectantly, his expression suggesting this was the only reasonable solution any rational person could support. Are there any objections to this proposal? He asked, his tone implying that none would be reasonable or responsible. Yes, I said clearly, standing up so everyone could see me. I object completely. All eyes turned to me as Jake's confident smile tightened around the edges. Emma, I understand this is emotional for you, he said condescendingly. But we need to think about what's best for everyone, the company, our employees, our clients. This isn't about emotions. I interrupted firmly. This is about facts. Facts that this board needs to be aware of before making any decisions that could destroy everything my grandfather built. I nodded to Martin, who began distributing thick folders to each board member. Inside those folders, you'll find detailed background information on Jake Morrison, or should I say, Jake Stevens, which is his real name. The color visibly drained from Jake's face as I continued speaking. You'll find documentation of 3 previous marriages, all to wealthy women. All 3 of those marriages ended within 2 years, with Jake walking away with substantial assets while leaving his ex-wives financially devastated. You'll also find evidence of his recent meetings with our competitors and potential buyers for Sullivan Technologies, including extensive communications with DG Future about a possible hostile takeover. The room erupted in murmurs as board members began flipping through the documents, their expressions shifting from skepticism to shock to outrage. This is absolutely absurd, Jake sputtered, jumping to his feet. These are complete fabrications designed to discredit me because they can't accept that Emma isn't ready for this responsibility. Oh no, everything is verified by multiple independent sources, Martin interjected smoothly, including police reports from 2 of his ex-wives and recorded phone conversations with DG Future executives. I pressed on, feeling my confidence growing with each word. Jake has been systematically planning this takeover since before he even married my mother. His goal was never to help run this company or support our family. It was to strip our assets and sell what remains to the highest bidder. Susan Chen, our chief technology officer, spoke up from her seat. I can confirm that Mr. Mike Stevens has been accessing confidential product development files without authorization and has contacted at least 3 potential buyers in the past month alone. James Wilson, our CFO, added his voice to the growing chorus of evidence. He's also made repeated requests for unusual access to our offshore accounts and has asked very specific questions about how quickly certain assets could be liquidated in a sales scenario. Jake stood abruptly, his carefully maintained facade cracking completely. This is a coordinated character assassination, he declared desperately. Sarah, are you going to let them destroy your husband's reputation with these lies? My mother was staring at the photographs in her folder, pictures of Jake with another woman taken just 3 weeks ago, along with documentation of money he'd already moved from her personal accounts to accounts under his control. Her face had gone completely ashen. Is this true? She whispered, looking up at him with devastation in her eyes. Before Jake could respond, Grandpa cleared his throat and stood up slowly. The room fell silent. Even after stepping down, Thomas Sullivan commanded absolute respect in that boardroom. "There's one more matter the board should understand," he said, nodding to Martin, who distributed another set of documents. "This is the complete ownership transfer agreement. You'll want to pay particular attention to Section 23B. William Taylor, the board president who had known Grandpa for over 20 years, adjusted his glasses as he read the dense legal language. "So essentially," he said slowly, "Jake has no actual authority to make any of the changes he's been proposing or implementing?" "None whatsoever," Grandpa confirmed. "Emma owns 70% of this company. I retain 25%. The remaining 5% is held by employees and public shareholders. Jake Stevens owns exactly 0% and has no legal standing to make decisions about our operations, finances, or strategic direction. Furthermore," Martin added, "any changes he's attempted to implement over the past week, including restricting Miss Sullivan's access to company systems or requiring his approval for departmental decisions, constitute corporate interference and could result in criminal charges." The meeting dissolved into chaos as Jake continued shouting accusations while board members conferred in shocked whispers. My mother sat frozen, staring at the overwhelming evidence of her husband's deception and manipulation. William Taylor finally called for order, banging his gavel repeatedly until the room quieted. "I believe we've heard more than enough," he announced gravely. "This emergency meeting was called to address concerns about leadership stability, and I think those concerns have been thoroughly and definitively resolved." He looked around the table, making eye contact with each board member. "Unless there are any legitimate objections, I move that we formally recognize Emma Sullivan as CEO of Sullivan Technologies, effective immediately, with Thomas Sullivan serving in an advisory capacity as specified in their transfer agreement." The vote was unanimous. Even the board members Jake had been courting abandoned him completely, recognizing they'd been manipulated by a skilled con artist. As the meeting concluded, Jake stormed toward the door, pausing only to hiss at me with pure venom. "This isn't over. Emma, I'm still married to your mother. I still have leverage and connections. You have no idea what you're dealing with." Grandpa overheard and stepped smoothly between us, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had made him legendary in Silicon Valley. "Actually, Jake, your belongings have already been removed from Sarah's house. The locks have been changed, and divorce papers are being prepared as we speak. You might also want to check your bank accounts. Any unauthorized transfers you made from Sullivan family funds have been frozen pending a criminal investigation." For the first time since I'd known him, I saw genuine fear in Jake's eyes. He looked desperately toward my mother, but she turned away, tears streaming down her face as the full scope of his betrayal became undeniable. "Security will escort you from the building," I said, signaling to the guards waiting outside the boardroom. "Don't bother collecting your things from the office. They've been packed and will be sent to whatever address your attorney provides." As Jake was led away, still protesting his innocence and making increasingly desperate threats, I turned to face the board members and executives who were watching with varying degrees of shock, admiration, and relief. "I want to thank you all for your patience and support through this difficult situation," I said, surprising myself with how steady and authoritative my voice sounded. "I know many of you have legitimate concerns about my experience, and those concerns are valid. I have an enormous amount to learn, and I'll be relying heavily on your expertise and guidance." I paused, looking around the room at faces that had been part of my life since childhood. But I was raised in this company. I understand its values, its culture, and its mission. I promise you that I will work harder than anyone to honor my grandfather's legacy while moving Sullivan Technologies boldly into the future. One by one, they came forward to shake my hand and offer words of encouragement. Susan Chen hugged me tightly, whispering, "Your father would be so incredibly proud of the woman you've become." As the boardroom cleared, I was left alone with Grandpa and my mother, who looked utterly broken and humiliated. "I'm so sorry. Emma," Mom sobbed. I never imagined he could be so manipulative and calculating. I just wanted to feel loved and secure again after losing your father. I wanted to stay angry, to make her feel the full weight of her betrayal and the pain she'd caused. But looking at her now, really seeing her for the first time in years, I understood what Grandpa had tried to tell me. She wasn't evil, just deeply flawed and vulnerable to manipulation by someone who had studied her weaknesses and exploited them expertly. "We'll talk later. Mom," I said, neither accepting nor rejecting her apology yet. "I think you need some time to process everything that's happened and figure out who you want to be moving forward." She nodded tearfully and left, escorted by Grandpa's assistant who would drive her home to begin the difficult process of rebuilding her life. "That was exceptionally well handled," Grandpa said once we were alone. "Both Jake's exposure and your mother's situation. You showed strength without cruelty. Justice without vindictiveness." I sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted as the adrenaline of confrontation faded. "I still can't believe we actually pulled it off, This was just the beginning, Emma," Grandpa reminded me gently. "Running this company will mean facing challenges like this regularly, though hopefully not usually from family members. The business world is full of people like Jake. Charming, manipulative individuals who see successful companies as opportunities to exploit." I looked out at the Silicon Valley skyline, the magnitude of my new reality finally sinking in completely. "I'm terrified, Grandpa." He sat beside me, his hand finding mine. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp and alert, but remember what you accomplished today. Remember how you stood up for yourself, for this company, and for everyone who depends on us for their livelihoods. That's exactly why I chose you." For the first time in days, I smiled, not a forced or brave expression, but genuine relief and growing confidence. "So what happens next?" I asked. "Next," Grandpa said, standing and gesturing toward the CEO's office visible through the glass wall. "You move into your office and get to work. You have a company to run?" But Jake wasn't finished with us yet. 3 days later, James Wilson rushed into my new office looking pale and shaken. "We have a serious situation," he said, sliding a tablet across my desk. "DG Future just announced they're launching a hostile takeover attempt. They're offering shareholders a 30% premium over current stock price." DG Future was our largest competitor, with deeper pockets and more aggressive business practices than Sullivan Technologies. A prolonged takeover battle could drain our resources and distract from our core mission. "There's more," James continued grimly. "They've named Jake Stevens as a special advisor to their acquisition team. He's claiming intimate knowledge of our financial vulnerabilities and strategic weaknesses. The news hit me like a physical blow. Jake was using his brief access to our company against us, trying to destroy everything we'd worked to protect. I called an emergency meeting with our executive team and legal counsel. The mood was tense as we assessed our options and defensive strategies. "We could implement a poison pill defense," Martin suggested, referring to a strategy that would make our shares prohibitively expensive to acquire. That would protect us temporarily, but it might also spook investors and clients, Susan noted. It could look like we're desperate or unstable. As the discussion continued, I found myself thinking less about corporate defense strategies and more about Jake himself. What did he really want? Revenge, certainly, but also money, status, and validation. The man had an ego that needed constant feeding. "I have another idea," I said finally. "One that gives Jake exactly what he wants, just not the way he expects to get it." Over the next 48 hours, we put together a plan that was risky, but potentially brilliant. When DG Future's CEO, Marcus Collins, requested a meeting to discuss their acquisition offer, I surprised everyone by agreeing immediately. The meeting was set for Friday morning at our headquarters. Marcus arrived with his team of executives and lawyers, and Jake, looking smugly confident in his new role as special advisor. I greeted them in our largest conference room, where Grandpa and our executive team waited. Jake's eyes narrowed suspiciously when he noticed my mother was also present, sitting quietly in the corner. "Thank you for coming," I began pleasantly. "Before we discuss your acquisition offer, I thought you might want to see something interesting we discovered." I nodded to James, who started a video on the large wall screen. It showed Jake in a hotel bar with Marcus Collins, recorded 3 months ago, before Jake had even proposed to my mother. "I can get you inside information on Sullivan's quantum encryption project," Jake was saying on the recording. "Thomas Sullivan trusts me completely. Once I'm married to Sarah, it's just a matter of time before I have access to everything you need." Marcus looked extremely uncomfortable on the recording. "That sounds dangerously close to corporate espionage. Jake, DG Future doesn't operate that way. Call it what you want," recorded Jake, shrugged dismissively. "I'm offering you their entire research and development roadmap on a silver platter. All I need in return is a guaranteed position and a substantial percentage when this deal goes through." I stopped the video and turned to Marcus, whose face had turned to stone. "We have 6 more recordings like this, documenting Jake's attempts to sell confidential information to various competitors. Would you like to see those as well?" Marcus slowly turned to Jake, his voice deadly quiet. "You told me you had legitimate concerns about Sullivan's financial stability and management decisions. You said absolutely nothing about stolen trade secrets or corporate espionage." Jake was sweating now, his confident facade crumbling. "Marcus, this is obviously doctored. They're desperate and trying to discredit our legitimate business relationship. We've already filed criminal complaints for attempted corporate espionage and fraud," I interrupted, sliding a document across the table. "This is a copy for your records, Mr. Collins. We don't believe DG Future authorized Jake's illegal activities, but we wanted you to be fully informed before proceeding with any acquisition discussions." Marcus Collins was a ruthless businessman, but he'd built DG Future with a reputation for aggressive yet legal competition. The implications of being associated with corporate espionage clearly alarmed him. "Mr. Stephen's advisory role with DG Future is terminated immediately," he announced, standing up abruptly. "And I believe we should postpone any acquisition discussions indefinitely, pending a thorough internal review of this situation." Jake jumped to his feet desperately. "You can't do this. We had an agreement." "Which you violated by failing to disclose material information about your methods," Marcus replied coldly. "My legal team will be in touch about potential liability issues resulting from your misrepresentations." As DG Future's team filed out, Jake turned on me with complete desperation, his composure entirely shattered. "You think you've won everything, don't you?" he snarled. "This isn't over, Emma. I still have copies of confidential documents. I'll sell them to the highest bidder and destroy this company out of spite." "Actually, you don't have anything valuable," Susan Chen spoke up calmly. Those confidential files you downloaded during your brief access to our systems. We monitored every single download. What you actually received were elaborate decoys we created once we realized what you were planning. Any competitor who acts on that false information will be making multi-million-dollar strategic mistakes." Jake's face drained of all color as he realized the complete scope of his miscalculation. "Furthermore," my mother said, speaking for the first time as she approached him with quiet dignity, "the divorce papers have been filed on grounds of fraud, with extensive evidence of your attempts to steal from both me and the company. There will be no financial settlement of any kind." Jake looked frantically around the room, finding no sympathy or support anywhere. "This isn't legal. You can't frame someone like this." "Frame you?" I asked with genuine puzzlement. "Every recording we have shows you willingly attempting to commit crimes. Every document was accessed using your own credentials and authorization codes. Every conversation happened exactly as we've presented it. And we didn't frame you, Jake. We simply documented your own actions." Grandpa finally spoke, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of decades of authority and experience. "You tried to steal my granddaughter's birthright and destroy my daughter's trust and security," he said with calm finality. "Did you really think I wouldn't protect my family and everything I've built over 40 years? At that moment, security entered the room, accompanied by 2 police officers. "Jake Stevens," one officer said formally, "we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of attempted corporate espionage, fraud, and identity theft." As Jake was led away in handcuffs, still protesting his innocence and making increasingly desperate threats, the room fell into profound silence. The confrontation we'd been building toward for weeks was finally over, ending not with a corporate takeover, but with Jake's complete and utter defeat. My mother approached me hesitantly. "Emma, I don't expect immediate forgiveness, but I want you to know—" I cut her off by pulling her into a hug, surprising both of us. The anger and hurt weren't gone, but seeing her finally stand up to Jake had reminded me that she was a victim too, flawed and easily manipulated, but not fundamentally evil. "We'll work on rebuilding our relationship," I said quietly, "one day at a time." Looking around at our executive team, people who had taken an enormous chance by supporting a 22-year-old CEO through an unprecedented crisis, I felt a surge of determination and gratitude. "Now," I said with growing confidence, "let's get back to work. We have a company to run and a future to build." 6 months later, I was firmly established as CEO of Sullivan Technologies. The transition hadn't been perfect. I'd made my share of rookie mistakes and faced ongoing skepticism from industry analysts who questioned whether someone my age could effectively lead a company of our size and complexity. But with each passing month, I grew more confident in my decisions and earned increasing respect from employees who witnessed my commitment to learning, listening, and preserving the values that made our company special. Jake's legal troubles had mounted quickly after his arrest. Investigators discovered evidence of similar schemes involving 2 other wealthy families in different states. He was now facing multiple fraud charges across 3 jurisdictions and would likely spend the next decade in prison. The scandal had briefly made business news, but our transparent handling of the situation actually enhanced Sullivan Technologies' reputation for integrity and strong governance. My relationship with Mom was healing slowly but genuinely. The betrayal had cut deep, but as Grandpa had predicted, she wasn't malicious, just deeply flawed and vulnerable to manipulation by someone who had expertly studied her psychological weaknesses. "I've been a terrible mother in so many ways," she admitted during one of our weekly dinner conversations. "I put my own emotional needs ahead of yours far too often, especially after your father died." "Not always," I reminded her. recalling genuine moments of connection and love from my childhood. But often enough that it became a destructive pattern. She nodded sadly. My therapist thinks I've been trying to fill the void your father left with men who could never possibly measure up to him. It wasn't fair to you, and it wasn't fair to David's memory. At the company, I was implementing changes that honored Grandpa's legacy while moving us boldly into the future. Our first major product launch under my leadership, an enhanced cybersecurity platform that had been in development for years, exceeded sales projections by 40%. I had championed a more aggressive marketing approach that Grandpa had initially questioned, but ultimately supported with enthusiasm. Innovation isn't just about creating better products, I told him as we celebrated the successful launch. It's about how we present ourselves to the world and connect with the people whose lives we want to improve. Grandpa's health had improved dramatically once the stress of Jake's machinations was removed. Though officially retired, he still came to the office 3 days a week, offering guidance when asked, but increasingly stepping back to let me lead in my own style. "You know what makes me happiest?" he said one evening as we reviewed quarterly reports in his home study. "Watching you make decisions I never would have made, good decisions that would never have occurred to me." That's when I know I made exactly the right choice. As I look back on this incredible journey, I'm struck by the lessons I've learned that no business school could ever teach. Trust your instincts, but always verify the facts. Prepare for betrayal without becoming cynical or paranoid. Stand your ground even when it means standing completely alone. And perhaps most importantly, family isn't just about blood relations. It's about who stands beside you when everything is on the line. If you've ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. How did you handle it? What did you learn about yourself in the process? And if this journey has resonated with you, please subscribe for more real-life lessons about resilience, leadership, and the strength we never know we have until we're forced to find it. Remember, sometimes the people who try to limit you are actually the ones who show you just how limitless you truly are. Thank you for listening, and I hope my story gives you the courage to stand firm in your own moments of truth.